It's a bit of a train wreck right now, okay? Like, Apple hyped up Apple Intelligence last year like it was going to revitalize all of their software, and it felt mostly like they were doing it to please investors. It wasn't so much about us, the customers. They just needed to convince all of their existing and potential investors that we're an AI company too, we can do AI too, Apple Intelligence, it's gonna change everything. And that's why they marketed it as hard as they did, and it's just been embarrassing. The Genmoji ads, the delays with the improved Siri. Somehow Siri is worse. Didn't think that was possible, but people are getting conflicting reports about specs on their device, or it doesn't understand timers anymore. All kinds of new problems that have come up to the point that I stopped using it months ago, haven't missed it, and only really have seen more and more complaints about it as time has gone on. And of course, more and more delays. Apple saying, maybe now we're gonna have to wait till iOS 19 to roll out the contextually aware Siri, which basically confirms that way back in June, when they promised some of these features, they essentially had no clue how they were going to be able to do them. They were not anywhere close to the features being done, but they were ready to sell them and market them. But with all of these complaints and issues with Apple Intelligence, don't worry. Drew has a plan. Let's begin. I think the main reason Apple is facing so much pushback and complaining and overall market disappointment with Apple Intelligence is, for one, yes, it was extremely over-marketed. In my opinion, most of the AI features were like C-tier iOS updates. Like, there's all kinds of new features we hear about at DubDub every year, and these were all kind of average, but the marketing was, of course, acting like they were a way bigger deal simply because they utilized generative AI capabilities. So that's the obvious one. But number two, that I think is really kind of unnecessarily holding Apple back, is this desperate need for all of these features to run locally. Apple wasn't comfortable with just the two L's in large language model. No, they needed local large language model, because I think ultimately it was probably part of the pitch from the sales team or marketing team that, well, in order for us to capitalize on this AI trend, we have to act like all of the Apple Intelligence features are only available on newer hardware. And I think that was really the first red flag last year when they announced Apple Intelligence, was when they started saying, you need a 15 Pro for this to work. It's not going to work on a $1,000 15 Plus that they were still selling at the time that Apple Intelligence was announced. And it's not as big a deal with the Macs because they have great hardware as is, so pretty much anything with an M1 or later could run all of these features. But I feel like it's a lot more obvious with Apple's bread and butter, the iPhone line, and to a certain extent the iPad line as well, where, yeah, if you didn't rock an M series chip, you're just straight up not going to get a lot of these features we've been talking about. And I could see why the sales team would look at that as a positive, like, well, we got to convince more people to splurge for the iPhone 16 or splurge for an iPad Pro. That way they feel like they're getting in with all the latest updates, because if you don't have an M series chip in your iPad or an A18 chip or A17 Pro chip in your iPhone, then you're just straight up not going to get most of the new software features, which is a little scummy, and we can argue about ethics all day, but business-wise, I can understand it. I work in marketing too, you know, you gotta respect the hustle a little bit, but the downside, I think, is that now all of these intelligence features have to run locally, and I think that's probably part of the reason so much of these features are so disappointing. Like, if you compare what Image Playgrounds does compared to really any other AI image generator, Image Playgrounds kinda sucks, and I think we're seeing similar issues with Siri and similar issues with Genmoji. I suppose the rewrite tools are okay, but overall not too groundbreaking, and you can find them elsewhere very easily. But I feel like the rollout could go so much faster if Apple just bit the bullet, walked back Apple Intelligence a little bit, and rethought it for DubDub this year, and just straight up said, okay, you know what? A lot of these features could be done on the cloud, and they can still be secure in private. I think that's a false narrative that Apple keeps pushing to try to convince people that they need newer and newer hardware, is like, oh, you know, well, we could run all of these large language models and we could have Apple Intelligence run on the cloud, but we care about privacy and security. So we decided all of this stuff has to run locally on your iPhone, which eats into the battery life and substantially limits the capability, because as great as the A18 and A18 Pro chips are, they're still just 8 gigs of memory. And while they have some decent single single core and multi-core speeds, their wattage is substantially limited compared to what you can get through other AI bots, whether it be Grok, whether it be ChatGPT. That's why Apple keeps falling back on ChatGPT to do everything for them, but I feel like that takes away a lot of the capabilities of it. It's basically the equivalent of Siri going, "Would you like me to search the web for that?" That's how you know the digital assistant has essentially given up. And I think if Apple just decided that, hey, we're going to keep it all encrypted, they already talked at length at DubDub last year about private cloud compute, and just said, let's continue basically to do what they've already been doing for a better part of a decade now. Let Siri stay on the cloud, and the queries and the questions you ask it can still be done in a private and secure way, but we don't have to run all of these large language models and image generators on device, okay? Because that doesn't really have that many advantages. I'm sorry, if I'm generating like an invitation for a birthday invite, do I really need all of that to be run locally? Do I need that eating my battery life, or could we just push this to, the supercomputer in the cloud? Find a way to make the queries encrypted. I mean, we trust Apple with all of our photos and videos. Those are all going up to the iCloud library, and we trust them with all of our iMessages, right? That's not done on device. That has to be done through the internet or through the cloud, and Apple assures us that they found a way for us to store our memories and our videos and store all of our text messages and emails in a secure, safe, cloud-based system. Why the heck do they suddenly throw all of that out the window when it comes to Apple Intelligence? How come Apple Intelligence is all of a sudden like, yeah, no, there's no safe way to do that on the cloud. That's why it has to all be done locally, and we're all limited to what the 8 gigs of memory can actually unlock. In fact, if Apple would let some of the easy stuff off onto the cloud that allowed Siri to understand your context better and allowed image playgrounds to actually generate meaningful images, then they could probably spend a bit more time on coming up with AI features that do run locally, but are not limited to what just an iPhone chip is capable of doing. Do you really think that Apple doesn't have other use cases for generative AI that could take advantage of 32, 64, or freaking 200, 500 gigs of unified memory? Think of how much they could be doing with the Mac, because that has way more power and that has way more silicon to take advantage of, and yet they can't because they've put all of Apple Intelligence features under this umbrella of like, oh yeah, well that runs on iPhone, iPad, and Mac. So they spend all this time trying to come up with generative AI features that work on these tiny underpowered iPhone chips, and that means there's really not much time or resources left to develop really cool locally run generative AI features on the Mac. Like the feature I've been begging for a while is like, let an AI on my Mac watch the way I edit my videos, and then it could start editing my videos for me in the style that I like. I know generative AI is capable of doing that, but there's probably not much time going on with it because all the software team is designated to trying to make Siri understand context, and it has to do it all natively and on device. If it could do all of this on the cloud in a way that is secure and private, which I believe is possible, I think they could focus more on making generative AI features for beefier machines like the Mac and genuinely come up with some really impressive use cases instead of just, when does my flight land? Oh, let me check your email for that information. This kind of basic stuff should be offloaded and shouldn't be consuming more battery, and I know it would probably be awkward because then Apple could technically start rolling out Apple Intelligence features to older iPhones. This kind of stuff could probably work on iPhone 14, 13, and 12, and you can just say that, oh, Apple Intelligence doesn't work for those devices when you're out of Wi-Fi range, but we're even getting like good internet on planes now thanks to Starlink, and with 5G and Wi-Fi 7, shouldn't we have internet practically everywhere? So I don't really subscribe to the idea that, oh, well, Apple needs image playgrounds to work and be on airplane mode. Now, we have internet most of the time, okay? That's a BS excuse. So I'd say stop fussing around making sure every AI feature has to run natively on device, especially if it's an iPhone. In my opinion, there's not a lot of great AI features for smartphones that need to be run natively. I think there's a bunch of stuff that they could easily just push to the cloud. Included is part of a reason to pay for iCloud if you want, but it shouldn't require 8 gigs of memory just to do these very, very basic AI things. We've seen what's possible through ChatGPT and Grok and many others. Once it's a cloud-based service, they can do much, much better because they can let their servers do the heavy lifting. And I'm not against there being really impressive locally run generative AI features. I just think you should reserve that for the Mac or maybe some iPad Pros that have a bit more heavy lifting power in regards to the unified memory and the neural cores. But trying to get all of this to run on the iPhone, it's not helping. So what do you guys think they should do with Apple Intelligence. Should they stay the course? Should they walk it all back? Feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you all in the next one.